Damon Hill was on the F1 Nation podcast, and he had some things to say about the Charles Ferrari situation, and I have some things to say about the things he had to say about the Charles and Ferrari situation, but let's just take it quote by quote, because in the first two, he says, Charles's crisis is a mystery. Carlos conveys a greater confidence. Carlos seems to get more out of situations and do more with Charles than what he has. Now, this is a much bigger conversation than could possibly be covered in one video. Obviously, I disagree with this sentiment. I think that Charles has lost 2 race wins alone from his engine exploding. 3, actually, if you count Bahrain 2019. 2 in 2022 alone. And we could go point by point, but once again, this I feel like is more up for debate and requires a thorough examination of their entire time together as teammates that I am not prepared to do right now. What I want to focus on today is the second part, because it perpetuates a narrative that literally drives me up the motherfucking wall, okay? But let's go through the quote. Leclerc is not getting good support from the team as far as strategy is concerned. It seems a bit confusing and I don't understand why. This we can agree on, Damon. Instead, Carlos is taking control of the situation. He imposes himself and says, this is how I do it. And maybe that gives more confidence to the strategist. In saying this, Damon Hill is the latest in a long line of people who have had the revolutionary take that the reason Charles gets fucked over more by Ferrari is because Carlos can stand up to them and be like, this is what we're going to do, and that Charles is too mild-mannered and lets Ferrari walk all over him. I have 2 rebuttals to that. The first of which is that the team should be making the strategy. They know exactly where every other car is on track. They know what lap times they've been doing, what tires they've been on. They know the projections. They have the weather report. They have so much information that the driver does not have. That the fact that there are times when both Charles and Carlos have overridden Ferrari and been no, this is clearly what that is concerning and an indictment on the Ferrari pit wall. You should be able to trust your race engineer. The main reason why this narrative is so completely ridiculous is that Charles does push back on Ferrari fairly often and pick his own strategy and be like, no, I know this is wrong. I know what the right choice is. But Ferrari just doesn't listen to him. I'm going to give you 2 examples right now. The first I brought up in a recent video is Canada 2023, when he wanted, after they set out to do the outlap, he's like, no, we need to pit for slicks. Everybody in the paddock knew that the rain was only going to get worse, and Charles was like, let's put a lap in on slicks right now. We know it was the right choice because Lando did it, and he set a really, really good lap. And the problem is that by the time Ferrari came in on slicks and put Charles back out, then it was time for inters because they forced him to set a banker lap on inters first. And then when he came back in for inters because it was far too late for the slicks, they didn't even have the fucking tires ready for him. And all of this could have been avoided if they just listened to Charles in the beginning. Or if they did what a lot of other teams did and stick with your decision saying, we're going inters all the way. We know Lando's had a good lap, but the window is clearly closed. The rain is getting harder and harder. We fucked up, but you have to stick. Ferrari is so wishy-washy and back and forth. The second example I have is from Zandvoort that same year, where it was, as you can see, raining quite heavily. So Charles, along with a few other cars, made the call to come in on lap 1 and go for inters. And not only did Ferrari tell him no, and then he pushed back and they said no, and he said, I'm literally fucking pitting. Xavi continued to argue with him for 60 full fucking seconds as he's coming down. It's not 60 seconds in the pit lane, the full argument. But regardless, he argues with him the entire time he's trundling down the pit lane. And then when he gets there, Ferrari just no tires in sight. They literally have to run into the garage to get the inter tires, which obviously completely fucks him. And don't act like this. Because even if they're arguing back and forth, have the tires ready in case they ultimately decide to pit for inters. Also, as you saw, it was fucking pouring rain. So it's not that crazy that they should have the inters at least out of the garage. It's just so frustrating to see this narrative that Charles needs to stand up and make his own strategy calls and push back on Ferrari being perpetuated by people as high profile and knowledgeable as Damon Hill, when not only is it objectively ridiculous that the driver who has none of the information that the pit wall has be held responsible for making these choices, but also because when Charles does stand up and make the right call when Ferrari's call is like objectively ridiculous or wrong, they literally don't listen to him and then gaslight us all that there was even a mistake made in the first place. Like, that's the whole thing about Silverstone. It's not about Charles's decision-making or Carlos's decision-making. They did not receive the same weather information. I think that any good faith comparison of the two team radios during that period will tell you that. I'm not gonna get too far into this. I already made an entire crazy person rant about the subject. I don't know what it is, okay? I'm not inside Maranello's wall as much as I would like to be. But the more I watch, the more, here's my guess, is that it's not some grand conspiracy behind the scenes, a plot to help Carlos and to hurt Charles. I almost think it's not the reverse, in that like they're actively trying to sabotage Carlos to help Charles, but I think that Charles is genuinely their number one, and so more of the attention and the focus is on him. And in any other team, that would be a good thing. But after, they just are not, it's incompetence. It's pure incompetence, and it just gets schlepped more onto Charles in especially the last two, this year and last season, because he is more of the focus. But whatever it is, we find ourselves back here with Fred borderline explicitly blaming Charles for the bad decision he made at Silverstone, completely obfuscating on the weather issue, no mention of the weather report at all, or that Charles's was both incorrect and very different than Charles. No indication of that they're going to examine like maybe the way in which they report the weather. Why are Charles and Carlos using two completely different weather systems? Is this just up to the race engineer? Like, maybe that's something that one singular party should be doing for the team. Like, maybe an expert, the race engineer kind of has a lot going on, but I don't even know how it works. The thing is, it's that it's not being addressed at all. And now we're once again talking about Charles's bad decision-making skills, and this mistake has successfully been pushed off onto the driver. And it's little things over and over and over again that add up to the grand. I mean, I've watched it happen time and time and time again.